Hi everyone. In the last lesson, we talked about average velocity. In this lesson, we will talk about average speed. Now, the two are totally separate. Remember, in the last lesson, we talked about the fact that speed is how fast an object moves in any direction. So, speed is a scalar quantity. But velocity is how fast an object is moving in a particular direction, which means that velocity is a vector quantity. If you recall, by definition, the average velocity of an object is simply defined as the displacement of that object divided by the total time taken. In other words, V average is simply equal to delta x divided by the time interval delta t. I can rewrite this as delta x divided by delta ti. So this is the definition of average velocity. Now, what about average speed? Average speed V average is simply defined as the total distance traveled divided by the total time taken. The total distance traveled divided by the total time taken. In other words, V average is equal to D divided by delta T, where D is the total distance traveled divided by the total time taken. Understand that distance, as we discussed in our previous lesson, is not the same thing as displacement. Distance is the total length of path traveled, while displacement is the change in the position of an object. This means that the distance traveled by an object is always positive, while the displacement of an object can either be negative, positive, or zero, depending in the direction in which the object is moving. It's important you keep this in mind. Now, one of the things that is common to both average velocity and average speed is that average speed is measured in meters per second. Average velocity is measured in meters per second. Both have the same unit, but they are not the same physical quantity. One is a scalar quantity, which is average speed, and the other is a vector quantity, which is average velocity. It's important you keep this in mind. Now, a simple example that I can give to differentiate between average velocity and average speed is as follows. Let's suppose that John is initially at town A. He walks to town B, and let's say that the distance between A and B is 50 kilometers. And he walks from A to B with a speed of, let's say, 3 meters per second. And then he walks back from B to A with a speed of, let's say, 5 meters per second. So the question would be, what is his average speed and what is his average velocity? Remember, average velocity, V bar average, is simply the total displacement divided by the time interval. And in this case, the total displacement here, he leaves, remember, the initial and the final point are the same. So the displacement is 0 all divided by the time, this will be equal to 0 meters per second. So in this case, the average velocity is 0. What about the average speed? By definition, average speed is the total distance divided by the total time taken. So the question is, what would be the total distance and what will be the total time? Now, I'm going to put here V average. V1 will be equal to D1 divided by T1. D1 is the time from A to B, and V2 will be equal to D2 divided by T2, and D2 is the distance from B to A. So this is just D, and this is just D because they are the same. This would mean that T1 will be equal to D over V1, and T2 will be equal to D over V2. Hence, the total time taken will be T1 plus T2. This is going to be D over V1 plus D over V2. So we can therefore see that V average is going to be equal to the total distance, which is going to be D total divided by the total time. The total distance here is 2D because he moves from A to B and from B to A, divided by the total time, which is D over V1 plus D over V2. We can simplify this to be equal to 2D divided by D bracket 1 over V1 plus 1 over V2. This D can cancel off with this D, and this would mean that V average is equal to 2 divided by 1 over 3 plus 1 over 5 meters per second. You can simplify this and you get your answer. Now, this is a classic example that shows you clearly that average speed and average velocity are totally different. In this case, the average velocity is 0 because the displacement is 0, but the average speed is not 0. Now, before we move on to the next lesson, keep in mind that average velocity is total displacement divided by the total time taken, while the average speed is the total distance traveled divided by the total time taken. The total distance traveled is simply the magnitude of displacement or the length of path traveled by the object irrespective of the direction. Keep that in mind. Thank you.